Yeah, so let's get started. If we look here, the first topic is the documentation progress. And Eric, you were saying you haven't really looked at it for 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I was going to try to spend some time, like a couple of hours every day. That didn't really happen. So I was spending most of my time on Scrimba. And yeah, so I'm hoping to go through your suggestions, like all of the outline basically that you proposed. That's what I'm going to continue with. And I ended up adding a page here accidentally because I was mixing up modules here and here. So one thing that would be interesting is, Sindre, could you tell us what you're planning with the handbook? Like what's the handbook?
Yeah, so it's basically kind of in flux now. I'm not sure it should be called the handbook, and probably the textual, a lot of the textual content from that should probably be somehow merged and moved into the scripting, templating, and styling guides eventually. So right now it's essentially just the documentation I write. I just put it all in what I call the handbook. And the plan is just for me to add like a terse guide to all the major concepts that you need to understand and know about. But it's very like not complete now. A lot of the sections are just blank and yeah. But if you see, like when you go to styling and let's say you go to modifiers, like in the modifier section
there?
Yeah, I've started adding some like dynamic reference. So that's a reference table where you could filter on different types of style modifiers and those kinds of things I'm going to eventually add to the main documentation. But I think it's difficult to decide what should go into sort of guides and what should go into reference, and yeah.
Nice.
I think it's difficult. I'm just
what's this yellow thing here?
It's just a tiny, like if you add some weird syntax inside the code blocks, it can change some of the, like it can highlight a single word and stuff like that. Nice. I just played around with it, so.
That's cool.
Nice. Yeah. That's cool, man.
So yeah, it's very work in progress, as are the other guides, I guess, but.
So would you prefer it if we don't touch the handbook and only try to touch the other sections or the other directories to avoid any collisions?
It's a good question. Yeah, probably, because right now I think the handbook is mostly me trying to organize like what I think need to be presented, documented. But it might be smart to move that below the guides or something for now. And then, yeah, I'm not really sure, to be honest.
Yeah, I see. I definitely have to read through this more because I've just looked at the top sections of the handbook. Haven't really drilled down further.
So I think loops, like the loops section of the handbook, that's kind of the good example of what I think the handbook should be. Like very simple, to the point, short examples of the different concepts.
It's like little flashcards.
Yeah, almost. Like it's almost like a huge cheat sheet.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So one thing I was wondering was the search. Like the ID is awesome. This looks great, but like if I want to search for the loop stuff, I'm here on the overview. Yeah. So are you still thinking of adding a similar search box?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. But I think that will have to come like when we've started to settle the documentation a little more. But yeah, that's definitely the plan. And that will search through different sections and headlines and show you like the, let you easily jump between the different results and stuff.
Question.
Yeah.
So did you already create, this is for Sindre, the links between pages? Can you link from one page to another?
I think you can. Yeah, if you look at the URL now in the browser of Alexander's browser, you should be able to just add a markdown link to /guide/ blah blah blah, whatever the section is.
Okay. So if I want to link to like the variable section and then there's a subheader there or an ID or something, can I potentially link to that?
Right now, yeah, that's you can't link to a subsection. No, yeah, you can only link to a page. Okay. But we can. So I haven't prioritized that yet, but it's relatively easy to add. So we can definitely do that.
Yeah, in my documentation, sometimes I briefly mention something, but when I think of it, I put a link. I put an empty link saying, "Go here to learn more about it." And I need to go back, revisit those, and actually add the links in. But I think it'd be good for people when they read a summary of something to be able to click to learn more.
Yeah, I agree.
Like I may mention classes when talking about something else, and then if you want to learn more about classes, then I have a link there to go to learn more about classes.
I also, if Alexander, if you go to, let's say, handbook elements and form input bindings, I also just added inline examples as well. So that will be really cool and helpful.
Can they edit the code above?
Not right now, but that's the plan. Like letting you actually just use an inline Monaco editor. Yeah, but again, they should at least be kind of synced then, because if you go back to the site, that has some additional features that are really nice, especially in the styling section, where you can actually resize if you look to the right of the preview, you can resize the preview window to test like dynamic responsive styles and stuff.
Very cool.
And if you go to styling, like handbook styling, and then to interpolation, you can see a cooler example. Like I'll get back to that, but I actually added, like, nice. Now you can actually interpolate real dynamic values into the styles.
Nice.
So yeah, it's a lot of cool things. The styles are becoming really powerful.
Awesome. So, yeah. I can't wait. I have a lot of catching up to do on the styles.
Cool.
Awesome.
Nice. Is there anything else that you want to showcase here in the handbook?
So I can do that afterwards. But a good example, if you go down here, it's really weird that it's in this section. But yeah, if you scroll down in the section you are in, like in the presets, no, not in the menu, but here. Scroll down here, and you look at the grid example here. This is one of the examples where it's actually valuable to be able to resize. Then you can see the responsivity of the style stuff. But
I like being able to do that independently from the browser.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. But it's like the style stuff has gone through a ton of changes over the last 2-3 weeks, because I started it started out with a lot of helper stuff like Tailwind and a lot of custom properties and custom we did a lot of custom things that are outside of the existing CSS, like native CSS syntax. And I kind of gone a little back on that for a while, because it gets tricky when you want to use CSS variables and stuff. So yeah, I need to
Are you gonna give a rundown on this presentation? This meetup?
Yeah, maybe I should do that, probably. But it's difficult to remember all the changes. But yeah.
Do you want to do that later, or do you want to do that now?
Oh, I guess we can run through the other topics first, and then I can do that at the end, because it's easily the biggest thing that we'll go through. So
yeah, that makes sense. So the VS Code extension, I know you haven't been working on it, so or I'm assuming it. Have you done any work on the VS Code extension?
I actually did a little work yesterday and today, and I haven't deployed the new version, but I pushed it and updated the version number. So I will probably deploy it after this or tomorrow. The only changes there is that it just adds support for the new styling syntax with some basic autocompletions and things. So, but yeah.
So the other topic I added was the bug triaging on GitHub. So should we try to allocate some time in the future to go through all of the issues on GitHub and then mark the ones which are older resolved or the ones that no longer apply to Imba v2 and close those? Like how should we approach that if we're gonna spend any time on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. There are quite a few issues for v2. Some of them I just have to answer, I guess. And there's been so many changes that most of them are probably just not applicable anymore. What's to inherit? Yeah, we should allocate some time to do that, but maybe not now.
So maybe next month or in 2 months?
Yeah, maybe next month or.
Cool. So do you want to take over the screen for the styling stuff?
Sure. Is there any, like what was the Nordic championship stuff?
Oh, do you want to cover that now?
Yeah, I don't even know what it is.
So I have a picture here. So yeah. I sit at the startup lab and people come by and talk to me and I talk back. So
yeah,
one thing that some of the folks at Digit have been mentioning to me a couple of times is Nordic Frontend Championships, which is some event they're trying to organize together with Microsoft here in Norway. So it seems interesting. I'm personally not interested in the competing part. I don't really care about that. But what I'm interested in is we can showcase Imba there as one of the frameworks and then try to be a part of that event and then, yeah, try to win it. Like while we are there, we should try to win it. And it's going to be a way to just get Imba in front of some people. So I don't know what the value of that event is going to be. And I don't know if I explained it well enough. They're still working out the details on the event, but maybe, let's say, I think they were talking about September or November timeframe. So okay. I think we should try to keep that in mind, and then try to we don't need to have a real hard deadline, but we should have it would be cool to be able to show it off in a specific event and something local where we don't have to travel or something like that. So that's just what it is. Does it make sense?
Yeah. I guess we can get back to that when it's getting closer. Or
yeah. So what do you think about attending a hackathon to showcase Imba? That's basically what it is.
How long is the hackathon? Is it like a weekend?
I don't know. They haven't they're still working out the details, but it's probably going to be multiple rounds or something like that.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's this part. So we can move that up, and I'll post more when I hear more. And if we don't, if the event turns out to be something that's going to require too much time, we can drop it and then focus our efforts on other things.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So do you want to take over the screen now?
Yeah. I just want to try to remember most of the things that have changed, but I'll go through that. Let's see. Post disabled attendee screen sharing.
Oh, this happens every time. They've changed the security stuff. So let me see. Multiple participants can share. Okay. How about now?
Let's see. Yeah.
I'm not seeing anything.
I need to.
There, something is happening.
Now you can see it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and you see I'm in the documents. Maybe I should just zoom in for the stuff. I'm just gonna go through, just mention everything as they come up, because I won't remember all of it, definitely. Just starting with the CSS syntax, we went through it in the last meeting. I don't remember like the state of it at that time and what has changed since that time. So I can just go through it basically from scratch. So we have the style declarations where you can actually declare styles using the CSS keyword and a selector, and then a bunch of CSS properties like you would in regular style sheets. And essentially, it, besides not using curly braces, it supports native CSS. You could essentially paste in native CSS and it would work just without the curly braces. You can use semicolons after these properties, but you don't need to, like they're optional. And another important difference is that instead of using colon for pseudo elements and pseudo classes, you use at. And I can get back to why that is later on as well. So you can define these CSS styles here. They are always global. Like if you do CSS something and you include that script in your application, this style rule will be globally available. So everything with the BTN class will be styled this way now in the project.
Nice.
You can also do all of the properties on one line or multiple lines, but you can actually have more than one property on a line. As I mentioned here in the docs, this will probably look messy and weird for most people. So just, you have to trust the system and understand that eventually it will be all make sense and feel very good when you use it in the real world.
Question.
So we also have a bunch of aliases for often used properties. You can see I've gone back and forth on a lot of the aliases and renamed them. And
wait, Sindre, could you just go back? Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Like I think Eric wanted to ask something, and I also want to ask a couple of questions for this part.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
You're saying that these are global, and I'm assuming that these are declared at the root level of the document, right?
Yeah.
If they're declared within a component, are they still global?
No.
Okay.
So we can get back to that later with scoped styles.
You're gonna
like
get to that.
Yeah, if you do it inside of a tag, then they are local to that custom tag.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
One thing I was wondering about is like, if I have the CSS.button, why can't I also just say CSS.button equals to, and then can you use the equal sign here? Or
so we can come back to that. I've actually removed the need for the equal sign. It felt kind of weird, and it felt weird that you had to use it when you did a one-line style and you didn't have to use it when it was indented, and it sort of just didn't feel right to me.
Okay.
So now you should never use the equal sign in styles. Okay. And if you want to do it on one line, then you can actually just do it like this. Because now we actually, because we are not using the colon for pseudo elements and things like that, we can always know when the selector ends and the styles begin. And I've also rewritten the way we actually parse and then compile the style rules so that you can now correctly do multiple styles where you can, like, I don't have an example here, where you can do CSS H1, H2, H3 and like do multiple styles in one block. That didn't work before, but it works now.
Nice.
So these weird looking properties are just shorthands, aliases for commonly used properties. You can see all of the aliases here in the styling reference. I think we might add a few more aliases now, but I don't think any of them will change anymore. They have changed a lot of times while I've been using them and working on them, but I think they're kind of like closing in on their final state, so to speak.
Cool.
So the pseudo elements and pseudo modifiers, we call it just modifiers in Imba, like CSS style modifiers, and you can use them in selectors, like you have here, dot button at hover, that will create a style. You can see it's pretty weird, but this is the actual native CSS selector it creates. That can be used in selectors, but it can also be used inside of the properties. So if I do CSS button, I add a lot of properties for this button, but I can also do a property and then add one or more modifiers, and it will style just that property that way. So if you see, this looks weird again, but you will see that it's created a separate style rule just for that background color. Right. And this is extremely useful, especially for media queries, like when you only want to have a property this way or that way on small screens, large screen, medium screens, and all that. I can go, right. And especially if you, not sure if I have an example here, but let's say you have some CSS root and you have some variables like big or app color white, or sidebar width 200 pixels. You don't want, when you have variables like this that you want to change the value of depending on different modifiers, it's extremely nice to have this, to be able to use this kind of syntax. Especially since I jumped ahead now. The thing is, if you set a property without a property name, like just with one or more modifiers, it will essentially always refer to the previous property name. So in this case, I can do sidebar width 200 pixels. On large screens, it should be 240 pixels. And on extra large screens, it should be 300 pixels. Oh, wow. This is a much cleaner way to define that than to, like, even the ideal with Imba, you could do like this. But without something like Imba or another type of CSS processor, you would essentially have to create 3 different media query blocks and set the properties there. And then you lose track of where variables are actually set, and you can't really understand the specificity and how they are overriding each other and stuff. And that's also cool because we have in addition to these types of modifiers, like the breakpoints, like screen sizes, we also have, if you want to have a style something for dark or light screens, let's say, you can look at the modifiers here and you can see media, we have print, screen, all the breakpoints. We also have dark and light, which is just prefers color scheme, dark and light. And that's especially useful in this type of setting where you can have, like, in one place on root, you define things like this, app color white, and then you do dark gray or whatever. Like, then you can also know that you set up all your colors and you always have an alternative for the light and dark layout. So yeah.
Oh, so cool.
So that was one part. Let's get back to this. Yeah, you can also nest styles as well, just like you could in SAS and LESS and all those. We have scoped styles. So if you do that same kind of style declaration, but inside of a tag body, then all the stylings there will just exist inside of, for elements inside of that, that tag. So let's see this example here. Does this not run? Oh, just wait 1 second. Oh, I lost it. Run. Yeah. So now you see that in this example, you can see that the H1 and the P outside of here, it has these styles. But the H1 and P inside of here has the different color and things like that. And yeah. So that's
I have a question on this.
Yeah.
So in some instances, it might be helpful to write a style within the component that changes something on the global scope. Is there a way to do that?
So we could add a global CSS, like a global prefix to the CSS. It would be easy to do. But what kind of examples, like, do you have a good use case for that? Because in most cases, I think the best practice would be to just in the same file define a global style.
I mean, yeah, that's probably true. I'm thinking like if you have a component that, for example, handles the theme of a page, you may want global styles or global variables to change, and you may want to keep that within the component. But yeah, I guess you could put it within the same document. But I thought some people might naturally be driven to do that.
Yeah, that's something we should consider. And when we have a clear thought of the use case, then I'm sure we can find a way. Like the easiest is to just add global CSS, like a global prefix. But I guess it might be that it turns out that when we talk about this, it's always talking about CSS variables, and maybe we should instead have some sort of like global modifier for the variables, or myvar at global, whatever, something like that. It's yeah, I'm not sure until I totally understand the use case, I guess.
Yeah, the style is
yeah,
CSS in JavaScript thing, it had a way to access global from within like a scope.
okay, yeah.
You can see what they did there, but yeah, I can probably try to think of a good use case for that.
I can just as I'm showing this example now, I can show another type of feature, because so right now I've just shown you CSS declaration blocks, but as you probably know, you can also do this inline inside elements. Let me see. I think there is something broken with this. I do think this V2 server might not. I'll try on localhost instead. I think it sometimes breaks with the live updating. Let's see. Yeah, there it was. It was just. So in addition to these pseudo modifiers, where you can do like in p color fs, let's remove that here, fs 20 pixels, and then I can say at hover 15 pixels. That's kind of weird, but then you will see that it changes font size there. But another type of modifier is like instead of at something, you can do dot something. And that will essentially be a modifier like this value should only be set if the P has the class large.
Okay.
So then you have P and P large, then you see that it will 15 and 20, that makes more sense.
Could you potentially nest that within the P, indented below?
Inline? What do you
mean? Can you do it below also, the dot large? Can you move that to the next line and indent it?
Yeah, but if you do that, then you will need to include the property as well. No, you don't. I'm just fooling you. Yeah, it works. But I guess in this case, you should actually also include the property name. I think that's clear.
I see. But yeah, I get you.
And the cool thing is that these modifiers also work inline. So.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I just got what that's doing. I had it misunderstood it a little bit. It's perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I'll get back to. I'm gonna polish up and show more examples and stuff in the documentation. But we have like the modifiers we have is at something. We have dot something, which is for class modifiers. We have dot something, which is for outer class modifiers. And the same thing with at that. So if you're familiar with Tailwind, you have group hover. Because in many cases you want, like I want this H1 to change color when the whole app card is hovered. If I want to be able to do that in a concise manner, now I can do basically like color gray, and if I do now hover blue 6, then it will change color only when I'm over the H1, right?
Nice.
But if I do this, then it essentially says that when the outer when the topmost part of this CSS rule is hovered, then this should apply. So now
Nice.
that didn't work. But I'm just.
I get it though. That's
essentially,
cool.
Yeah,
it's like scoped.
Yeah.
Like a context, like context.
Yes, and it's a really convenient shorthand way to do the same thing that groups and group hover stuff in Tailwind tries to do.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So let's get back to this. Scoped styles. Yeah, we've been through scoped styles. Inline styles. This is actually, it looks kind of messy, but I think that's one of the most powerful parts of this, because in many examples, like pretty large applications, most of the styles you will add can be done perfectly inline. I know Eric probably won't do that because he likes to keep it fully separated, but especially for layout stuff like boring flex and
there's use cases,
yeah, it's very convenient, because then you actually have a fully declarative, like what you see is what you get. The whole component and its style is right there within the template, within the tag stuff.
Now I noticed that you're using the square braces. Sorry to interrupt. Does that affect data binding in any way?
Yeah, it's essentially that's one of the things I should mention. Yeah, so data binding is changed to, and that was also already kind of inconsistent, but to do bind data now, you just do bind equals and the data you want to bind. And if you want to set data directly, like regular, then you just do data equals instead of the curly instead of the square brackets. I think that's I've thought about it quite a lot, and I think it's good. I think the square brackets for data was kind of like not self-explanatory, and it was very weird that we on compile time only bound the data for elements of the name, input, select, stuff like that. So if you wanted to do a custom bind wrapping, like here we do, we actually let you bind to a custom element, which then forwards that binding to a native checkbox. If we wanted to do that earlier, then you would have to fall back to a different syntax for binding to the custom elements than to the native elements. Yeah.
No, it's perfect.
Yeah.
My opinion.
Let me see. So that was scoped styles and inline styles. You can also do like conditional inline styles this way, if you want to. But to be honest, like this is kind of the same. I'm kind of inconsistent here, but you could do this. Here you just apply an inline style with the condition. That would kind of be the same as just doing adding a class on the condition. And you could in the full inline style, you could do like done gray 4 and td done S, which is just line through, which is an alias for that. But these kinds of styles will quickly clutter your templates if you add a lot of visual styles to all various elements. So the next part is mixins. I'll go quickly through that. I think I need to document it more and spend some more time thinking about how to explain it concisely, but it's extremely powerful and cool. And the basic concepts here, let me see if I can actually make this example work. Damn it.
Sorry, Eric, could you mute the mic?
Yeah, sorry.
Thanks.
Yeah, so Eric can just unmute if he has questions, so I'll just go ahead with this now. So mixins, we might change the name, but it's essentially just like classes, but they are unique across the project, and they will never affect like unrelated styles. So one problem is that if you define a dot button style somewhere, then you can also always end up like affecting weird elements somewhere else in your application that also has that class name, or even affect elements that come from outside, like if you import or render markdown or something, something like that. So mixins are essentially a way to define, import and export and reuse scoped unique styles across your project. So right here I have no idea why this doesn't refresh. I just want to check out quickly. Yeah, there's just something weird going on. So in this is, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, it just it's totally silent. So, so in this case, I've just created a button mixin CSS, and this is I can use this anywhere in this file right here. So instead of doing like dot button on my elements, I can do mods or %sign button, and this will apply this unique class to that element. So this mixin here has some additional styles. It looks, since you're not used to this syntax here, I can show it, make it more explicit. I'm essentially adding like worn big A yellow 2, say yellow 7, and then do danger 2 and 7, just to make it clearer what this actually does. So this unique style here, when I add this to an element, any element with that mixin and other classes like danger and warn will then get these styles applied. I hear myself now and I hear that it sounds really messy, but just bear with me and try to understand the concept, because it's not that weird and it's very powerful. So right here, it looks like, why wouldn't I just use this kind of this thing instead? And in this example, that makes perfect sense. But the thing is that I can actually export these mixins. So let me see here if I have an example here. I have a shared file where I've actually created, I export a box mixin and a button mixin. And so in my application here, I import those from that shared style sheet and use them in a few different components. I can trust that these are totally scoped. They will not like escape and start styling unrelated elements, but they will also, you can also override and extend the styles within different components. So try to look at this example right here and understand what happens. I'm mounting an application like that's the app tag. That's the main one. It includes a button with that button mixin, and it includes a group, and that group includes a button with a button mixin, and the group includes an item with that button mixin. But inside of, so what did you say?
Sorry, I had unmuted for a second. I just wanted to say that. Yeah, I get it. This is awesome. I'll give some feedback in a second. Keep going.
Yeah. So the whole point here is that when I'm overriding the button mixin styles inside of this group, you will see that if I remove this here, and again this damn thing doesn't refresh now. So when I remove that in the item, you will see that the button inside of the item still has the background color declared in the like main root button mixin. But since I've overridden the button mixin in the group, then the elements that has that button mixin in this group, but not inside inner components, it will override the styles just for the elements in this semantic scope of the group. So it's a really powerful way, because that would be a problem. Let's say I use button everywhere in the application, and inside of this group, I just want to add a small tweak. I want to change some parts of the styling. I definitely don't want that tweak to also affect menus or other types of components that just happen to exist inside of the group. So this is a very powerful way to be able to extend and use scoped styles across different tags.
This pretty much satisfies the workflow for scope or styled components. pretty much.
Yeah.
You can pretty much create styles and inherit them wherever you want.
Yeah, I think it's actually even more powerful. And I think I have some ideas about how they could even be extended, where you could actually like do export CSS or export box. And then inside of that, you could add like the grid, blah, blah, more sub mixins. And it could export in a way that when you use that box mixin from somewhere, like here, then you can even like box, what was the thing I added? Like row, call. Then I can here like use that inside here, and that will refer to the unique style inside the box thing.
Yeah, that's perfect.
That makes especially sense if you, let's say you create a CSS thing for a panel, right? So usually you might often have a panel and then you add a header and a footer style. And you don't want to do this because this will style the header and footer inside of any child inside of the panel as well. But that could be solved if you do it like this, and then, yeah. So there are a lot of interesting possibilities.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like it.
Yeah, cool. Moving on. That was mixins. The next thing is interpolation, and that's also really valuable and powerful. And that's the thing that inside of inline styles, I might add it to tag body styles as well, like scoped styles. But right now it's only for inline styles. You can actually interpolate real values directly into the styles, like I do here. In this tiny example, I just added a point remove event where I just set the pointer variable to the event itself, which has an X and a Y property for the position of the move. And as you can see here, I inline style this div here with the background color and set X to something, Y to something, and rotate to some other part of that. And then the style is actually live updated. And just to inspect this, it's not rewriting any style sheets or anything. It is when it compiles the styles, it creates placeholder CSS variables. And then when we render, we update only those variables. Nice. So it's extremely efficient. Like there's no meddling with style sheets or rewriting and reparsing specific style rules or anything. It's just intelligently using CSS variables as placeholders. So
I just wanted to say it's really cool, but I have to run to the bathroom quickly. So okay. I'll be away, but everything is still running. So just keep on.
Yeah. So I can also, as you can see here, you can also set the units afterwards, because that sometimes becomes really awkward when you need to work with CSS and JavaScript, that you end up with these ugly types of things where you just always have to do stuff like that. And yeah, in this case, it would be even weirder because you would need to do like an often to fixed blah, 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 and then to add a percentage. So instead, you can actually just set the unit directly after the interpolation. And that's also useful for when we set the CSS variable. Let's say I do set content at before. Will this work? Hello. Yeah. Now I just set the content property of the before. If I wanted to do that with let name test. So usually if you just set a CSS variable to that value here, then it will not be, let's see, name. The thing I wanted to show is that, if, let's say I do, if I instead just set a variable and I set that there, and then I just do var n, then this won't work. And the reason it won't work is that if you see here, when I set the variable, it will set to the raw value of the string as it should. But if you, when we do the interpolation, we actually take into consideration what property you are trying to set the interpolated variable on. So then we will alter it to quote the string if it's a string, and round it if it's supposed to be a pixel, or yeah. So we can do cool things like that as well to make the things a little easier.
Very neat. This is exciting. I haven't seen anything that works like this, man. This is crazy.
Me neither. And it is really, I have used it now for a long time with Imba, the new Imba site, and already I think it's like I haven't really started using a lot of the new things yet, but I think it will. Where I've started using it, I've cleaned up the styles a ton, and it's so fun to work with. Like, it's so easy to express yourself clearly. I just before this meeting, I tried to change this clock example, and I literally got rid of, let's just see for fun. I think I got rid of, if you can see this here. If I have the clock, it's just, I'm looking for the applications clock. I basically removed 110 or so lines of CSS from the clock example and replaced it with this style.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it's
cool,
even though it probably looks cryptic for people who are not used to these modifiers and this shorthand way of styling things, to me it already looks really obvious. Like the fact here,
it isn't.
Yeah, when you see these dials here, I've added like a short age, hour, minute, and second classes, and by doing that, I can do like really quite understandable. I set the width to 5 pixels. When it has the minute class, it's 4 pixels, and when it has second class, it's 3 pixels, and so forth.
Yeah, it's not that cryptic. Like it's pretty straightforward.
So it's extremely powerful, and and the rotation as well. If you remember the old example, I actually created a transform string and set it, stuff like that. Here you can just use the individual transform properties directly, and we behind the scenes create the variables and make it work. So. Just to see how a paint thing is done now. Again, I have no idea why this crashes. Some weird. It's probably got to do with the zooming stuff. So this is a tiny example, and this is the whole example. Like, there's no additional styles hidden behind the scenes. There's no additional libraries. There's no nothing. Let me see if I have a draggable thing here. This is also just a draggable. I can go through that later, but I also added a custom touch event, which is basically just a wrapper around pointer events, like pointer down and pointer up and things like that. But yeah, it's really getting very expressive and nice now.
Very cool.
Yeah. So
I
think
know.
That's...
You can't do this stuff with like CSS preprocessors or anything. So
no,
they don't have access to the JavaScript. So only like the big players like React and Vue and all that could incorporate any of this, but that probably won't happen anytime soon. Maybe Vue.
Yeah, they can't incorporate any of it unless they actually create their own syntax for styles, though. And I can't see that happening.
Really?
Like,
yeah. Awesome.
Cool. So I think that's a quick overview. And in the coming days, I'll try to tighten up the documentation and things like that. But
great work.
Awesome.
Yeah, cool.
Outstanding.
So I had one last question with regards to the aliases. So if we go to them, so I know it makes sense to us when we read this stuff, but like for me, I'm gonna make flashcards from this, like all of the acronyms, and that's how I'm gonna remember them. So I'll just create like a bunch of flashcards, put them into a spaced repetition tool, and then just memorize them over time. That's honestly what I'm gonna do. But what I'm worried about is if I do that, like, what do you think is gonna change here? Like, which parts are you the most unsure about if you look at that, and what is the naming convention?
So I think that when we launch this after beta, there shouldn't be any changes to aliases ever. Like, we might add more aliases, but they shouldn't change, because that's the whole point. Like people, it's not a good idea to use short cryptic variable names usually, but this is not like variable names. Like these are abbreviations and representations of static, meaningful concepts. And most of the aliases that you will use the most are inspired by Tailwind, among others. Like they are just the natural shorthands. Like margins, you have margins and paddings are just P, and then the sides like L, R, T, B, and also X and Y to set both left and right and top and bottom in one property. For grids, yeah, that makes sense. Alignment, backgrounds are relatively simple, like they all start at BG. Borders is the one I'm most unsure of because it just feels kind of arbitrary right now. Transforms are set in stone, I guess. They won't change at all. Also, you will be able, like the tooling isn't done, but you should definitely be able to toggle between them. No, like expand and contract the aliases if you want to. And also you should, I'm not sure if it works now, but you can see that it also has like autocompletion in the tooling that shows the shorthands. And that, so you can choose to use the shorthands or not. So if I know I'm going to set the flex direction, then you will see that, oh, FLD is the actual shorthand for flex direction. And as you can see, it also includes autocompletion for the values.
Love it. It's great.
So I haven't added that for the internal colors and stuff yet. Yeah, that reminds me, one more thing I need to cover. And that is that like we ship Imba with a bunch of preset colors, and they're all taken from Tailwind now, and some box shadows and some fonts and some font sizes. I'm still not sure how we want people to customize that style sheet, like the kind of the theme, if you want to call it that. But one idea I had that I started exploring, which I think makes sense, is that essentially if you, let's see, I can try to run this. If I want to do, let's say I have, I want to add a box shadow to this, or a shadow. These shadows here are taken from the theme. And you might say that, oh, either you could change them in the JSON or recompile the project or something. But another thing you could do is that when we compile the styles here, like the box shadow styles, it will see that, oh, so the box shadow style is just LG. It's just a single identifier and it's not natively supported in CSS. Then we'll essentially compile to something where it tries to look up a variable named box shadow dash and then that name you use. And it will fall back to the predefined style that is supplied with Imba. So instead of editing a JSON file to customize the style sheet, here I would essentially extend root, and I would do 10 pixels, 10 pixels, 10 pixels, black or red. So I can override the shadows and fonts and whatever from Imba by just adding CSS variables to my root. And I can also add new ones like huge and stuff. And then I can do like shadow LG at hover, huge. And then you will see now I have actually added a custom type of box shadow that can always be. So you could do this in regular CSS as well, but it would get kind of cumbersome where you have to always write stuff like this whenever you want to use them.
So if you want to override the default colors, you just use that with the variables.
Yeah, but
cool.
It doesn't work for colors right now. And that's because I need to do some smarter stuff where I split up the hue, saturation, and lightness. And yeah, it's just a technical issue. But you can do that for fonts and things like that already. And it's also nice for things like grid. Like if you set grid to just some name that you don't, that is not a valid value for the grid property, then you can just, in your root somewhere in the application, just do grid some name and then add, set it to some sort of grid value. And the cool thing about that is that then you can also make this responsive. So this is a really bad example, but let's say I want to have a grid type that is called flipping, and then I'm just going to do, so it's suddenly when I set display grid flipping here, whenever I hover over the grid, it will change to that value.
Yeah.
So again, these are not great examples, but it is powerful.
That's amazing. I'm speechless.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty cool, but like I need to try this more. At least, especially as I understood it, you were explaining the @hover now autoflow stuff, right? That's being applied to the grid flipping or the flipping here, right? When you hover.
Yeah. What do you mean?
Like the hover part there, is that being applied to the last thing that was mentioned before it on the left-hand side?
Yeah. It's like doing this.
Yeah, and that's like, I'm not saying it's bad. Like, it's just like I'm not used to thinking in that way.
Yeah.
So I need to play around with it more.
Yeah, I agree that it looks weird, especially in the cases where you have multiple parameters to a property where you have spacing. It looks a lot less weird when you have just one, like if it was like this. But yeah, you will need to get used to it for sure. But it's very valuable. So one last feature that is just, I've used it for some things. We could remove it, but it's just at least a fun feature, is that you can also natively define your own custom units. So if I wanted to say that one Eric is 100 pixels, I could just do this somewhere in my CSS, in root, let's say, and then I can do inside of there just age one Eric. Let me see. Now it might have just stopped working. I'll see if it actually. Yeah, I think it's just stopped working. So here you can see that the boxes are now one Eric, and then I'll change it to be 2 Erics. And this tiny example doesn't look that like it makes too much sense, but I can, if you have 3 minutes, I can actually show an example that makes sense. And that we have
question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm understanding. You're creating your own units. Is that what you're doing there?
Yeah. And
so you could hit. So 2 Erics would be 200 pixels.
Yes.
What?
But
okay.
let me show just an actual useful example for that. And let's get this down here. And that would be like you in CSS, you have the CSS unit VV and VH, which is viewport width and viewport height, right? Let's remove just all this other stuff right here. And in many cases, you do want to have a container, like this is a built-in thing in Tailwind. You want to have a container that has a certain width, and when you expand the viewport above this width, the container should still be at a fixed width. I'll try to explain. Let me see. So let me see that, say that this section should be with 300 pixels. Now I think this is not reloading again. Grid false. No, I'm actually. It might take some time to show this, but
no worries. Like I have to leave in 40 minutes something, so
okay,
I can be around for the recording.
So let's say we have this width here. I do stretch. I don't remember all the grids we have. Now I remember. So instead of setting the width of the grid, I want to set the column width. like grid template column to 200 pixels, and then center the content. So now we have a grid which fills the whole width of the page with one column that is 200 pixels wide. And this is a nice way to do the container stuff, where you, instead of 200 pixels, you essentially want to have this width to always represent the container like breakpoint. So now when you have it at 100, then it obviously just follows the whole viewport. But now I want to add a my own custom unit. So 100 breakpoints will be, I just need to remember like the 300 pixels, 100 breakpoints. I'm sorry for this. I just need to see styling modifiers, the breakpoints we actually use. So XS is from 480 and above, SM is 640 and above, and MD is 768. So in this case, I'll say that one breakpoint is 300, and in XS it is 460 pixels. And then I'm just going to say that this grid here is 100 BR wide. And the thing here is that, let's see if this works. Now I have an actual, like in the whole application, I have a different unit that is kind of like viewport width, but is viewport width that is always representing like a predefined width I want to have inside each breakpoint. And now I can't, because of the design of this this thing here, I can't really show you all the different breakpoints. But the whole point here is that you get, instead of adding a lot of custom functionality, you essentially get this type of, don't they have an example here? Yeah, you essentially get the container type of functionality from Tailwind. That was not a good example. I should add a better one. But again, I'm not totally married to the idea. I just experimented with it because I found it useful in some concepts.
No, I get it. It adds a lot of functionality.
Yeah, especially if you have a custom type of spacing where you want to be able to define your margin and paddings in different. So here I could actually do like one margin is 10 pixels and one padding is 20 pixels. And then I could just use those like PX, 3P, or PY. Now I do, so this is 60 pixels above and below. And then I could, with media queries, like say that when it's SM and above, the padding unit should be 30 pixels instead. But then you will probably see here that it will change.
This last example made much more sense. Now I get it.
Okay. Yeah.
This one was good.
Yeah.
So, like,
cool.
You would use your own. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's kind of like it's using CSS variables behind the scenes. It's essentially just a convenient shorthand way of not having to do like my padding times, or it's even uglier. It's like times 3, and etc. Totally. Whatever you want to use that. And there are a lot of places where it makes sense. Yeah.
That's very good.
Cool.
I don't know where you got that idea from, but it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, really great work, Sindre. Let's wrap it up. So,
yeah, let's wrap it up.
Thanks. Is there anything else anyone wanted to mention, or can we end now?
I think that's it. I just got to keep working through the documentation, adding my parts.
Nice.
And then I think once I'm done with, when I remove all the work in progress tags, then you guys can go over and
Yeah.
and, you know, proofread it or whatever. But you guys are working on your own sections for now, so you probably should just focus on that first, and then
Yeah.
and then we edit everything together.
Yeah. So please let us know when you want anyone to go through, because like I'm totally avoiding stuff. Like I'm not going through stuff in detail. I'm gonna try to hopefully follow up on my part of the outline, and also go through the handbook, because there's more stuff there now. It was more. There was less stuff there earlier. And Bohuslav, if I remember correctly, you're using Imba 1, right, with your Django app?
Yes, I'm using Imba 1, and I now see that Imba 2 is. I can say that it is brand new language. It's I had a lot of differences with Imba 1, and I'm really amazed. It's very beautiful. It's brilliant.
Nice.
Cool.
I like it.
Hopefully, if you haven't had a chance to look at it, like use it, please do, and be ready for some issues, because it's still in alpha, right? So there's going to be some pain points, but Sindre is fixing stuff really quick, so yeah.
Yes, I had one small app, and I can try it on it. A small songbook, and I can rewrite it from Imba 1 to Imba 2.
That would be amazing to get some feedback.
Yeah.
That would.
But by the way, just as I remember it now, I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but now you can again do uppercase tags and import and export them if you want to do that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
They're actually compiled to unique web components behind the scenes, but now at least it works.
Okay, so it will add maybe another word before or after with a dash?
Yeah, it will essentially add a unique, based on the file it exists in, it will add a completely like unique web component.
Okay. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, and have a great week. So
you too.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks
Bye.
for joining, guys.
Thanks.
When the documentation will be available?
The documentation is available now, v2.imba.io, but it's a work in progress. So stuff is probably going to change there. I don't know. Did that answer your question?
I want to also ask about touch events. Is it working now?
Sorry, I didn't get the last part. Could you?
Touch events, mouse move.
Batch events.
You mean like
events?
To be. To you mean pointer events like mouse move and?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. See.
So you can definitely add. It doesn't. You still can't create like. See, I have a good example here that I can start with. So you. So you still can't create events by like you could in Imba 1 by just creating mouse move like a method, but you can do those types of events here, like just bind it to something.
And so on mobile devices.
Huh?
And so on mobile devices.
Yeah. So mouse move doesn't work on mobile, but touch move works. No, pointer move works. So if you miss kind of the touch start, touch end, touch stuff in from Imba 1, then I just today and yesterday I think added the touch event that kind of replaces that. You can use native pointer move, pointer start, pointer up, pointer down, all of that. You can read up on it, like all the mobile vendors now implement and support pointer events, which is a cleaned up, much better alternative to the old touch events API. And that's what we use here, like for the Paint app. Then it's basically just binding to touch, which will be called for pointer down, pointer move, and pointer up, and it will capture the yeah, correct. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yes.
Yeah. So you can mess around and look through the documentation, and I'll find out why the REPL, like the editor, really struggles with reloading.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Reason. Yeah.
Cool. I have to get ready to work out soon, so yeah, I'm gonna end the call now. Thanks. Bye.
Cool. Thanks.